An engine like this in a car the size of a Golf, this is never going to happen again.
Look, on the upside, it doesn't have one of those ridiculous garbage plastic water pumps like every other Golf ever made since then.
Sounds so good. Okay, look, I'm going to warn you right now, even though the Mk5 R32 Golf is undeniably an iconic car, according to the internet, my God, it can have some issues. The thing is, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad car as such. And also, it doesn't define if you should or shouldn't buy one either. So look, we're going to unpack all of that because we're about to show you what can go wrong with these and what you need to look out for. We're going to show you how they're aging and what they like to drive and live with. But before all of that, why is the Mk5 R32 so iconic in the first place? Well, see, it marked a turning point for Volkswagen. This huge investment resulted in an all-new car, and it showed the world that Volkswagen had basically rediscovered its mojo. The R32 was the flagship model of the lineup, and like the impossibly cool Mark IV R32 that came before it, it came packing a 3.2 litre VR6 and Haldex all-wheel drive hardware borrowed from Audi. However, unlike the Mark IV, it offered either a 6-speed DSG or 6-speed manual transmission, plus the choice of 3 or 5 doors. Now, think about that for a second. In a world where engines are getting smaller and require turbos to add thrust, an engine like this in a car the size of a Golf, this is never going to happen again. Now, this whole combination puts it in an incredibly unique position in the used market. Like, I mean, sure, a Mark VI Golf R, it offers more firepower, but it's just a 2-litre turbo like pretty much every other hot hatch out there, and that's hardly unique. If you want the R32's hatchback packaging with the utter delight of a 6-cylinder engine and all-wheel drive, well, yeah, Alfa Romeo's exquisite Brera ticks some of the boxes, but it's nowhere near as convincing when it comes to practicality. The BMW 130i or even the M135 and M140i offerings are both worthy alternatives, but being rear-wheel drive only, well, they're going to lose the traction fight. And while we're on the subject of struggling with traction, Toyota's V6 Corolla, or Blademaster G as it's actually called, and Alfa's 147 GTA, they're worth consideration too, as is the Mazda 323 Estina, but good luck finding one of those in working order these days. In terms of pricing, really shit examples are asking about $7,000, mint condition examples around about $30,000, although that is ignoring some of the very highly modified ones that are asking over 50 grand. But no matter what price point or even car you're looking at, you got to hit that driver link down below if you're looking at finance. Driver will get you a whole bunch of different quotes from a stack of different lenders. The entire process is super easy and free. Look, there's honestly a whole bunch of other benefits. Just hit that driver link. Now, between you and I, a Mark IV R32, it is my very favorite looking Golf of all time. Although in saying that, a 3-door Mark V, this is a 5-door, comes a very close second. And you know why I love the look of these? It's this front grille section. I love that it just features so strongly on the front of the car, but then it looks like it's getting sucked down into the intakes. I love this. And then from behind, I adore the rear taillight design. I love the center pipes. Also, is this the first car that Volkswagen integrated the actual tailgate handle into the badge like that? Let us know. Now look, it's wonderful that this absolutely looks the business, but you've got to remember, this was a transition car for Volkswagen, and unfortunately, a lot of cars from this period for Volkswagen were far from perfect when it comes to quality and things like that. How does the R32 stack up? Well, first up, let's talk electrical issues. We're talking door lock actuators, central locking, power window issues. Owners have complained that they've had some dramas with these things. The good news, however, is to take the outer door skin off or even the inner door card, it doesn't take that long. So if you want to have a go at fixing this stuff yourself, accessing all of it is pretty easy. Also, if you're happy to buy quality aftermarket parts instead of OEM, you might save yourself some money, plus some of those parts can be better quality than what Volkswagen make. Next, there are some reports that the mirror glass can delaminate, but again, really cheap and easy fix. Now, the height adjuster for the headlights, it might fail. Sometimes it requires an entire new motor. In saying that, it might also just be one of the sensors. If it's just a sensor, that's a pretty cheap and easy fix. Also on the headlights, the wiring or the insulation around the wiring, it can become brittle and that can cause some issues. Now look, this next one, it doesn't impact just the R32 Golf. This can hit all sorts of cars, but if the drainage holes around the sunroof, if they get blocked, can create all sorts of hassles. The water will find its way down the A-pillar, in behind the dashboard, eventually finds electronics and even the ECU. It can be a complete nightmare. Basically, just make sure any drain holes on these are cleared at all times. Also not a R32 specific issue, but a lot of Mk5 Golfs are guilty of this. Rust and corrosion around the wheel arches, up under the sills, and the bottom of the A-pillar. Now, this isn't a major issue in warm climates like here in Australia, but if you're in a cold climate with salted roads, yeah, check that out. Also, if it's parked outside all the time or hasn't been cared for, a lot of owners mention that the clear coat can go a bit dodgy and the paint generally doesn't last all that well. It's not that resilient. In saying that, it's an R32. Like, please look after it. Also, it's critical to remember, this is a performance car and it's not exactly lightweight. In fact, this thing is heavier than the current base spec RAV4. And that weight, it puts a whole bunch of extra pressure on things like suspension components and brakes and tires. So just make sure that the wear pattern on all the tires are even. Make sure that the tires all match and they are performance rubber. Just basically find out as much about the car's history as you possibly can. Look, just make sure you go and watch our ultimate used car buyer's guide and make sure you get a vehicle history report done. That'll show you if there's any money owing on it, if it's been written off, or if it's stolen. And to get one of those, simply head to ReDriven.com or hit the link down below. Also, another link down there is going to get you 15% off and free express shipping on a set of awesome WiperTech wiper blades. They're honestly some of the best wiper blades we have ever used. They're easy to order, they're easy to fit, and we use them on all of our cars. And you know what? Alex that owns this car, he's going to be using them too because he's getting a free set for lending us his car. What a legend. Now, before we get into the common complaints inside, I should mention that pretty much all the information that we're presenting to you comes from various R32 owners groups and forums and Volkswagen specialists. So thank you so much to you guys for helping us put this together, especially Nick, who's like the Wikipedia for all things Volkswagen. Mate, you're a legend. Now, as far as common complaints and faults inside, first of all, the headlining can sag like an old Ford Falcon, but it's pretty easily fixed. Now, this next one seems to affect 3-door cars more than 5-door cars, but the seat mounts, they can get a bit rattly even when they're securely fastened. It seems to be that because it's a 3-door, you've got to flip the seat forward all the time to let people sit in the back, and that constant forward and back will wear the seat mounts down. It's easily fixed, but just don't have friends that need to go anywhere. Now, plenty of owners have complained that a lot of the interior plastics, it is getting a bit brittle at this age and things can break. And if you hit any sort of bump yet, the whole interior can rattle like a maraca. Actually, especially guilty for the whole brittle plastic thing is this coin tray down here. They can snap and fall apart. However, the biggest complaint with these interiors comes from just random electronic gremlins. Sometimes it can be really simple and easy to fix stuff like a switch kind of failing, something like that. Other times it can be the signs of a more insidious issue, maybe like a window mechanism that needs to be replaced or something larger. It's not necessarily the car's fault. This thing is getting old. These things will happen. And the same can be said for the whole air conditioning system. Sometimes it's a really cheap and easy fix. Other times the entire dashboard has to come out of the car to get to the problem and fix it. That will obviously be very expensive. Now, our tip with a lot of these issues is to check out the owners groups because there are so many links to excellent tutorials on how to fix some of the more common problems. Also, owners mentioned that while the leather is super supple when it was new, if it hasn't been cared for properly, it can degrade, as you can see in this particular car. The leather can get really loose on the seats. It can sag on the door cards. It's pretty guilty for going pretty bad on the steering wheel. If they are really well cared for, this will mitigate some of these wear and tear issues. However, it is getting old, you know, it's gonna do this. Plus, like any sports or performance seat of this age, the bolsters closest to the getting in and outside, they can kind of collapse and lose all their structure. Now, in saying that, as far as the wear and tear in this particular example goes, and look, obviously every R32 is going to differ in wear and tear depending on, you know, how the car's been treated. This thing has over 305,000 kilometers on it, and it's also had a pretty intense life, shall we say, and I think the interior is aging relatively okay. Yeah, okay, there's some cracks and whatnot on the leather, and it could definitely be reupholstered to bring it back to its best, but the plastics everywhere are wearing quite nicely. Just on the plastics, actually, on the Mark IV and the Mark VI, you might note that they went to that soft touch, almost rubbery kind of finish, but the problem with that, it doesn't wear well, so it just starts peeling off, or I think it's called devulcanizing is the technical term. With the Mark V, because it's just plastic, it wears really, really nicely until it gets brittle and rattles. Also, from a design aspect, I think it's aged really, really well. It is obviously showing its age, but I feel like this interior, it's starting to delve into that retro cool level. I like the way this looks. I really, really like this metal finish everywhere. So often performance cars like this have, you know, the fake carbon fiber trim, but this, I think it is actual maybe aluminium, but I love it. Just adds the right amount of bling. Also, the actual ergonomics, Volkswagen nail this. Firstly, the driving position is absolutely perfect. These seats, even after this many years and this many kilometers, the seats are fantastic. They feel so supportive, but also really comfortable. Would handle, let's say, some spirited driving and a long trip to the snow. Even as far as practicality goes, really good. You've got an excellent sized glove box there. Got a little cubby hole in the center console here. Sort of 2 cup holders here. You wouldn't want to have a very deep coffee there, but you shouldn't have a deep coffee. You should drink some more pretentious coffees like me, like a Ristretto, something like that. Also, cubby bin here. Decent sized door pockets there, and a sunglasses holder. Oh, sorry. Sunglasses holder. Here. Sorry. Excellent. And also the little coin tray down here. And that's it up front for practicality. Now, being the flagship model Volkswagen Golf, you're going to get all the expected stuff, as you can see. Plus, the sound system is pretty bloody good. Now, on top of all that, you also had the option of some pretty tasty optional extras, as you can see, including some Recaro seats. And those seats look suspiciously like the seats you'll find in a B7 Audi RS4. That's not a bad thing. However, forget about Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. Even on most models on the used market, Bluetooth. Even the cars that do have Bluetooth, chances are it's just Bluetooth for phone calls and not actual audio streaming. The good news, however, is that there are plenty of really high quality aftermarket kits that you can get to fit these. Also, depending on who you speak to, you might be able to retrofit more modern Volkswagen tech into a Mk5 to get that proper OEM look. And also, the same can be said for some of the HVAC controls. Again, this depends on who you speak to, but you're going to be surprised at how easy it is to upgrade all the technology in here. Now, in the back seat, I'm exactly 3.42 R32 engines tall. This is in my driving position, and it's okay back here. My knees are rubbing it against the backs of the seats, but as far as space goes, it's what you'd expect for a hatchback this size. Although, the actual seat comfort, while the front seats are very cushy due to their 305,000 kilometers worth of usage, the back seats, there's like no cushioning. I feel like I'm sitting on a wooden bench, nothing supportive about them at all. Plus the leather is sort of gathering a little bit like they can do. That can be rejuvenated. It's okay back here. Also, because the headlining and the pillars are all black, it does feel a little claustrophobic in the back. The windows are large, but the tint is very, very dark. So it's a little scary, a little bit like being in a little Volkswagen cave. As far as features and practicality in the back seat, you get a couple of map pockets, you get your own air vents. You get what I think once upon a time were cup holders, but this is all sort of fallen apart a little bit now. You also get an armrest, and you can access the boot from there as well. And you do have door pockets, but they're really hard to get to. You've got to sort of dislocate your wrist to get in there if you're actually sitting in it and want to use it. As far as practicality in the boot goes, it's pretty much what you would expect for a Golf of this size. Not too bad. Load lip is hardly there at all. Really good opening aperture. Plus the seats, they do fold sort of kind of flat. Now, as far as safety features go, look, obviously it is wonderful that it's all-wheel drive, so you're kind of already winning the fight against physics. But to take you through the safety features, rather than cutting to another voiceover, how about we just show a graphic with one of the most enjoyable soundtracks that we could ever possibly provide. Now look, obviously we're not going to expect you to remember all of those features, let alone the list of everything that can go wrong in these. So to make referring to that stuff so much easier, we've listed everything on our R32 cheat sheet over at ReDriven.com. It's completely free, and it's basically the ultimate used R32 buyer's guide. Now, when it comes to common complaints and faults about the driving experience, the first big one is this DSG. This was one of the first incarnations of a dual clutch transmission in production vehicles, and yeah, it had some teething issues. Basically, it can be a bit clunky and confused at around town speeds, let alone if you're doing a 3-point turn and you need to find reverse in a hurry. That can be a bit of a nightmare. Once you're up to speed, but yeah, it's a delight to use. Obviously, if you're really into driving, you want one of the manual transmission versions, but with the DSG, it's okay. Just don't go expecting any current levels of shifting accuracy or any of that stuff. It's an old unit. Just make sure when you're test driving one that there's no shuddering or anything like that. All of the shifts, they should be super confident, shouldn't be slipping or anything like that. Another complaint with these is understeer. There's a lot of weight over those front wheels. If you go diving into a corner too hot, yeah, it's gonna understeer. That's easily fixed, but just work on your driving skills. There's an old saying, slow in, fast out, that'll help you out. Sounds so good. Look, this is where the R32 for me just absolutely shines. The sound and feeling of this engine. Look, sure, plenty of turbocharged 4-cylinder engines these days will blow this thing away in terms of just sheer performance, but it doesn't matter because they cannot match this for just the soundtrack and just the overall experience. I'm not sure if it's the extra weight over the front wheels, but the steering feel in this is so much better than in any modern Golf I've driven recently. Even the ride and handling in this are absolutely superb. Granted, this is fitted with some very high quality aftermarket coilovers, but this thing, it rides and handles so incredibly well. But then it does all of the sensible, boring stuff just as well as every other Golf. It just sounds so much better when it's doing it. This is a car that just gets its priorities when it comes to the driving experience so right. It's not obsessed about acceleration times or lap times, because those things are completely pointless when you're driving on public roads like this. This is just about giving you the most amount of enjoyment possible every second of the day, and it nails it. Although in this one, the DSG, it can get a bit confused. And yeah, there are quite a lot of rattles when you hit bumps. And it likes to drink like a fish when you flex that right foot. And also there are the mechanical concerns you can have. And actually just on those, I can't tell you about the mechanical concerns because I'm not a qualified mechanic, but you know who is? It's Jim.
Look, actually the VR6 motor in these, the V6, which interestingly, if you don't know, it's a V6, but it's got 1 cylinder head. It's pretty cool. They are very stout, very strong, and overall pretty reliable. They do have some issues. One of the more annoying issues, they have some PCV system or engine breather issues. Now this whole PCV valve is located inside the valve cover. Now to get the valve cover off, you've got to take the inlet manifold off. And to get the inlet manifold off, unless you've got triple jointed elbows and wrists, you've actually got to loosen the radiator support panel so you can get at the bolt. So it's pretty labor intensive. All to replace effectively is what is a little plastic valve assembly. Not overly expensive, but a bit of a pain in the ass to do. Look, I'm just going to jump into the timing chains now. Whilst they're not considered a hugely unreliable part of the engine, they do have a few issues. More issues with poorly serviced and higher mileage items. Now, one of the more expensive issues with these is the timing chains. Now, it's not what you'd call hugely unreliable. They do fail occasionally, and they fail more when it's had high mileage or a poor service history. Now, the timing chains are at the back of the engine, right? Now, to get at them, you've got to take the gearbox out. And if you're doing it all properly, it's about a 12-hour job, and it's pretty bloody expensive. Now, on the flip side, if you have to take the transmission out because you need a clutch or a dual mass flywheel, which is also quite likely, it's a great idea while you're in there to do the timing chains. Now, if your budget extends to both, whether you've got the gearbox out for a gearbox problem or a timing chain issue, just do them both because it's so labor intensive. In the long run, you're gonna save a heap of money. Now, just on the transmissions, the DSGs in these, yes, they are somewhat problematic. They have clutch issues and mechatronics unit issues as well. It's a bit hit and miss whether they've been serviced or not. It's pretty much luck of the draw. Also pretty expensive. And yes, look guys, before you flame me in the comments about the DSG, you might have had one that's never had an issue, but all of you know someone that's got one of these that's had plenty of DSG issues. Now the water pump in these is a conventional water pump that's actually belt driven, as I was saying earlier, not one of those terrible garbage plastic items that fail every 40,000 Ks, so that's a good thing. But the thermostat housing and all the bypass pipes, they are all the same sort of plastic and they do fatigue and leak. Not hugely expensive and actually not that hard to get at, unless you have to take the manifold off, in which case, yeah, that can be a pain. Look, the driveline in these, pretty good as well. The transfer case can be problematic. It's not hugely common. And the Haldex is like every other all-wheel drive Volkswagen. If it's serviced properly, you're unlikely to have any issues with it. Actually, just on the transfer case, it's good to know if you're servicing it, it's got its own drain point and fill point. When you're changing the oil, it's completely separate to the gearbox oil, so just make sure you are all over that. The rest of the driveline, it's pretty good. Steering and suspension wise, like every other Volkswagen Golf from this era, the lower control arm bushes are made of cheese, so you probably have to do them every few years, but other than that, pretty good. Now the last thing I want to talk about is modifications on these. Look, they are a pretty popular tuner car. Just watch out for shitty mods. Now, there seems to be two camps here. There's the guys that spend an absolute fortune and use all the best gear, and sometimes they can be really good if done right. The ones you've got to watch out for are the people that have done it on a budget with shitty parts and not really know what they're doing. So just have a good look at those mods and make sure they've been done right with the right type of gear.
Now look, we understand that all might sound like a whole lot of doom and gloom, and you've probably come to the conclusion that, my God, no, you should definitely not buy an R32. However, that's not necessarily the case. The R32 was never intended to attract the majority of hatchback buyers. Even for performance car enthusiasts, it was created to be a unique alternative for quite a focused audience. And over 15 years on, this audience is even more niche. Hence, the R32 now has a cult-like following. And if you're happy to sign up to this cult and you have the financial ability to keep up with the car, absolutely you should buy one of these, because a good one is sure to be a future classic. However, to give you an idea of how much financial ability you might need, some of the owners we spoke to mentioned that their keep the R32 on the road budget hovered around the $10,000 a year mark. And look, we're not suggesting for a second that that is what it's going to cost to keep one of these running. But if you can't justify having a few $1,000s to keep these things on the road, we totally understand. And there's a whole bunch of other more sensible hot hatches out there that are going to keep you happy. But for those of you that have fallen for the R32's charms, yeah, I completely get it. When these are good, oh my God, they are wonderful. But then again, so are these. But if you weren't to buy one of these or one of these, what would you buy instead? Let us know in the comments. See you next time.
There's problems with these things, and I'm not going to say it's super common, but it's,
It's because of the front grille. I love that it just signifies.
and it's not one of, hell, having a bad day.